The day the Supreme Court took on Trump's tariffs and what it really means for your wallet. Something historic just happened in America, and most people have no idea how deep this rabbit hole actually goes. The Supreme Court of the United States, the highest court in the land, just struck down one of the most powerful economic weapons a sitting president has ever tried to wield. 6 justices against 3, a decision that sent shockwaves through Wall Street, through the White House, through every factory floor and family kitchen in this country. And yet, within hours of that ruling, the man in the Oval Office picked up his pen, signed a new executive order, and basically told the entire legal system, "Nice try." This is not just a story about tariffs. This is a story about power, about who really controls the American economy, about a political chess match being played at the highest levels of government, where the pieces on the board are your job, your grocery bill, your mortgage, and your future. So sit down, because we are going in deep. Let's start at the very beginning, because you cannot understand what just happened without understanding how we got here. When Donald Trump returned to the White House for his second term, he came back with one obsession burning hotter than anything else on his agenda: trade. Specifically, the idea that America had been getting robbed blind for decades, that foreign countries had been flooding American markets with cheap goods, destroying American manufacturing, killing American jobs, and laughing all the way to the bank while doing it. And in 2025, he did something no president had done quite like this before. He declared the United States trade deficit a national emergency. Not a policy problem, not an economic challenge, a national emergency. That word choice was not accidental, because by declaring it an emergency, Trump was reaching for a piece of legislation called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEEPA, a law that grants the president sweeping authority to regulate international commerce during a national crisis. In theory, this law was designed for moments like wartime sanctions, blocking the financial assets of terrorist organizations, cutting off rogue states from the global financial system. It was built as a scalpel for surgical economic strikes against America's enemies. Trump tried to use it as a sledgehammer against the entire world. He began imposing tariffs, taxes on imported goods, on virtually every trading partner the United States has. Not targeted tariffs, not negotiated tariffs, blanket, sweeping, across-the-board taxes on foreign products entering American markets. At one point, his so-called reciprocal tariff program hit dozens of countries simultaneously in what he called a liberation day for American commerce. The message was simple and blunt. If you want to sell your stuff in America, you are going to pay. The response from the business world was immediate panic. Stock markets convulsed. Supply chains shuttered. Companies that had spent decades building international manufacturing networks suddenly found their entire cost structures thrown into chaos overnight. Importers, retailers, manufacturers, farmers, everyone who had any connection to international trade was suddenly staring into an economic abyss, desperately trying to calculate what this meant for their bottom line. And the prices. We need to talk about the prices, because while the political debate was raging in Washington, ordinary Americans were starting to feel something very real in their daily lives. The cost of electronics, furniture, clothing, cars, appliances, anything that involved components or finished goods coming from overseas started climbing. Slowly at first, then faster. Because that's how tariffs work. They are not magic penalties that somehow punish foreign governments. They are taxes paid by American importers, which get passed along to American businesses, which get passed along to American consumers standing in checkout lines across the country. But Trump and his allies had a counterargument, and it was not without merit. They said short-term pain for long-term gain. They said the tariffs were leverage, a negotiating hammer designed to force other countries to the table and cut deals that actually served American workers. They said that for too long, America had played nice while everyone else played rough, and it was time to flip the script. And here's the thing, it wasn't entirely a bluff. Deals were being discussed. Negotiations were happening. Some countries, suddenly staring at the prospect of losing access to the most powerful consumer market on earth, started picking up the phone. Then came the Supreme Court. In a 6-3 ruling, the justices said that what Trump had done, using the IEEPA to impose these sweeping global tariffs, exceeded his legal authority. The majority opinion drew a clear line. Emergency economic powers are real, but they are not unlimited, and using them to fundamentally restructure global trade relationships was a step too far. This was not a close call in terms of the vote count. 6-3 is not a nail-biter. It is a decisive majority of the nation's highest judicial authority saying, in plain terms, that the legal foundation Trump had used to build his entire tariff architecture was not solid enough to hold the weight he had placed on it. The political left erupted in celebration. Democrats, who had been screaming about tariff-driven inflation for months, finally had vindication from the most authoritative source possible. They had argued all along that these tariffs were illegal overreach, that a president cannot simply declare a trade deficit a national emergency and then use that declaration to seize control of global commerce. And now, 9 justices, 6 of them, agreed with them. Senator Kennedy, however, was not celebrating from the other side. He was reframing. This is important to understand because Kennedy's response to this ruling tells you everything about where this fight is actually heading and why it is far from over. Kennedy went on television and said, essentially, that even Stevie Wonder could have seen this ruling coming, which is a remarkable thing to say about a legal decision that went against your own party's president. He was acknowledging the inevitable while simultaneously arguing it didn't matter because the tariffs had already done their work. Think about what he was actually saying. He was saying that the tariffs were never just about the tariffs. They were leverage. They were a negotiating position. They were a way of grabbing the world by the collar and saying, "You will deal with us seriously, or you will lose our market." And in his view, that strategy had already produced results. Agreements, commitments, deals that would benefit American workers and businesses for years to come, regardless of whether the tariff authority ultimately survived legal scrutiny. And then he dropped a number that should stop everyone in their tracks. $300 billion. That is how much money the United States government had already collected in tariff revenue by the time the Supreme Court ruled. $300 billion flowing from importers into federal coffers. Revenue that was already sitting there, already collected, already part of the fiscal equation. Revenue that Democrats were now, in Kennedy's framing, essentially demanding be handed back to foreign entities and American businesses. And Kennedy's argument was pointed. If that money gets returned to the American business community, the economic stimulative effect could be enormous. He predicted the economy would, and this is his word, colorful as always, roar. Not grow, not improve, roar. Now, whether you believe that analysis or not, whether you think tariff revenues flowing back to businesses would actually ignite growth or simply paper over structural damage, the political calculation Kennedy was making is sharp, because midterm elections are coming, and if the economy is surging, the party in power wins. It is almost always that simple. But here's where this story takes its most dramatic turn, and where the full picture of what is happening in America right now comes into full, almost breathtaking focus. On the same day the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's IEEPA tariff authority was unconstitutional, the President of the United States walked back into the Oval Office, sat down at his desk, and signed a brand new executive order, a 10% global tariff, on every country, imposed under a completely different legal authority. Let that sink in for a moment. The Supreme Court said one door was locked. Trump found another door, or at least claimed he had, and walked right through it. He posted on Truth Social that it was, quote, a great honor to sign a worldwide 10% tariff that would take effect almost immediately. The message to the world, to the courts, to his political opponents, and to every trading partner America has, was unmistakable. This fight is not over. It has barely started. This is the part of the story that the celebrations on the left are glossing over. Because winning a Supreme Court case is one thing, but when the person you defeated turns around within hours and recreates the policy under a different legal framework, you have not actually stopped anything. You have only changed the battleground. And now the legal challenges will begin again. New lawsuits, new injunctions, new emergency filings, new arguments before new courts, working their way back up through the federal judiciary toward the Supreme Court, potentially for years. While all of that plays out in courtrooms, the tariffs remain, the prices remain, the economic disruption remains, the negotiations continue, the deals get made or don't get made, and Americans across the country keep feeling the effects in real time. So what does this actually mean for you? Let's be direct about something that gets lost in all the political noise. Tariffs are not abstract. They are not theoretical. They are not a debate topic for cable news panels. They are a concrete mechanism that determines the price of things you buy, the stability of the job you hold, and the health of the business environment in your community. When a 10% global tariff gets applied to imported goods, importers pay more, businesses pay more, consumers pay more. That is the basic, inescapable math of how tariff costs flow through an economy. The question is not whether consumers feel it, they do. The question is whether the strategic benefits justify the cost, whether forcing trading partners to negotiate better deals for American manufacturers and workers is worth the higher prices in the short to medium term. That is a genuinely hard question with genuinely smart people on both sides of it. And anyone who tells you it is simple, that tariffs are purely good or purely bad, is selling you something. What we do know is this. In January alone, one single month, the United States collected $30.4 billion in tariff revenue. That is an increase of 275% compared to the same month a year earlier. 275%. The scale of money flowing through this policy is staggering. The White House has talked about using it to fund domestic initiatives, to reduce the national debt, to cut taxes elsewhere, to reinvest in American infrastructure and manufacturing capacity. Whether those goals get achieved, whether the revenue translates into the promised benefits, whether the economic disruption of the transition period proves to have been worth it, those are questions that will be answered not in courtrooms or on cable news, but in the actual lived experiences of actual American families over the coming years. There is something else happening here that is worth naming directly, because it cuts to the heart of what this moment is really about. We are watching, in real time, a fundamental argument about the nature of presidential power in the United States, about how much economic authority a president can exercise unilaterally, about where the line between emergency powers and running economic policy by decree actually sits, about whether Congress has effectively surrendered so much of its constitutional authority over trade through years and decades of delegation that the executive branch has become the sole functional decision-maker on issues that affect every single American. The founders gave Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. That is in the Constitution. But over the 20th century, Congress passed law after law that delegated more and more of that authority to the executive branch. The IEEPA itself was one of those delegations. And now the Supreme Court has said, at least in this specific application, that there are limits. That delegation has boundaries, that emergency powers are not a magic key that unlocks unlimited presidential authority over the global economy. That is a significant constitutional statement, and yet the same day it was made, it was partially rendered moot by a president who found a different legal hook to hang his policy on. This is the American system working exactly as designed, and also straining in ways its designers never anticipated. 3 branches of government, each pushing against the others, each asserting its authority, each trying to set the terms of a debate that ultimately gets decided not by lawyers or judges or senators, but by voters. Kennedy understands this. His entire posture in this moment, the confidence, the framing of the court's ruling as irrelevant to the ultimate political outcome, the warning to Democrats to be careful what they wish for, is the posture of a politician who believes his side is going to win the long game. Maybe he's right. Maybe the trade deals materialize, the economy accelerates, inflation cools, American manufacturing sees a genuine renaissance, and the people who supported this policy get to say they were right all along. Or maybe the costs compound, the legal battles drag on, the deals don't come together fast enough, the prices stay high, and voters decide in the midterms that the disruption was not worth it. That is the bet being placed right now, and every single American has skin in this game, whether they know it or not. Here's what you need to watch in the weeks and months ahead. Watch how quickly the new executive order, the 10% global tariff signed the same day as the Supreme Court ruling, faces legal challenges. Watch whether courts issue stays blocking it while litigation proceeds, or whether it goes into effect immediately and starts reshaping import prices in real time. Watch whether foreign governments respond with retaliatory tariffs of their own, which would hit American exporters, farmers, manufacturers, technology companies, directly in their revenue. Watch what happens with the $300 billion already collected, whether it gets redistributed, returned, held in limbo while legal battles continue. Watch whether Congress decides to step in, using its constitutional trade authority to either validate what Trump is doing or rein it in, and watch how that vote breaks down, because it will reveal exactly where the political center of gravity in this country actually sits on trade. Watch the economic numbers, not just the stock market. That is a wealthy person's scorecard that often diverges from what ordinary families feel. Watch the inflation data. Watch manufacturing employment. Watch small business sentiment. Watch consumer confidence. Because ultimately, the argument being made by both sides comes down to a simple question that ordinary Americans will answer through their own experience. Are we better off? And watch the midterms. Because Kennedy is right about one thing. They are coming. And in American politics, the ultimate court is not the one with 9 justices. It is the one with 330 million citizens. This is a story about power, money, and the future of the American economy at a crossroads moment in its history. A president who believes in hitting hard and negotiating from strength. A Supreme Court drawing constitutional lines. A Congress watching from the sidelines. A world full of trading partners recalculating their options. And an American public trying to figure out who to believe, what is real, and what it all means for the price of groceries next month. The script is not written, the ending is not decided, and every development in the days ahead will matter. Stay close. This is just getting started.